Welcome, everybody, to this very special episode of Boundary Breakers, where we're going to be diving into the world of dementia care with a fresh perspective. Today, we are joined by the remarkable guest that we have here today, Adria, as you know in our IG live chat, who is a master in many different pathologist ways and with experience of over 9 years and a passion for educating individuals. Through her performance at Be Like Care Consulting, she has reached hundreds and thousands of people on social media, as I'm sure you're all aware. From caregivers to families to curious minds, we're excited to explore some interlinking topics today. So, Adria, it's so great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Piper. It's really great to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I know we've connected quite a while ago, so this feels like a long time coming.
Yeah, I know. I'm so excited for this conversation. I feel like last time we met, it was months ago. What have you been up to since we last spoke?
Well, so I spent 6 weeks in Europe, which was a big thing that I did. Um, that was really fun. I went to 3 different events related to senior care and moved probably 3 times since I saw you last because I
Oh
moved.
my gosh.
But yeah, lots of fun things. Lots of travel.
Yeah, so what were some of these notable places you've been to since we last spoke?
I went to 9 countries while I was in Europe for 6 weeks, but the 3 big things I did was an event called Walking the Talk for Dementia in Spain, where we hiked portions of the Camino de Santiago, which is a really nice hike. And I did it alongside people who had dementia, caregivers of people with dementia, researchers, geriatricians, psychologists, neurologists, really cool group of people from all over the world. The second thing I did is I toured the dementia village. It's called the Hogevik in the Netherlands, and got to see this really cool model of care where individuals with dementia are living in a village community that it has restaurants and theaters and hair salons, and they can kind of walk about as however they wish. Really inspiring and neat. And the third main thing was a conference called Silver Eco, it was in France. And I actually won an international award for
No way.
caregiver support. So, yeah, really, really fun time and just very validating and inspiring to like continue doing what I'm doing.
Well, I know that that award was well deserved looking into the many different projects that you have been a part of. I'm so excited to talk a little bit more about that. So, we came here today originally under the umbrella of Be Like Care. So, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about the work you guys are doing there?
Yeah. So, Be Like Care, what we do mostly, what most people know us for, is creating short form videos, especially on social media, about how to care for individuals with dementia. So, I practice on really practical, actionable advice, like how to help someone take a shower, how to get them to drink more water, how to get them to take their medicine. I'm a speech language pathologist by background, and so I have experience over 10 years working with hundreds of people with dementia. So I love making just short videos, concise, straight to the point, that's, like very, very practical.
I see. So, what is the importance of practicality in this sort of work that you're doing?
Yeah, so I think, if we think about who's watching my videos, which is mostly caregivers, so that's either personal caregivers, so people who are taking care of loved ones at home, or professional caregivers who might be aides, nurses that work in care communities. Regardless which camp they're in, they don't have a lot of time. They're doing a lot of work, and it can be very draining. There's like a high risk of burnout in caregiving in general because it requires so much of your mental and emotional capacity. So it was important for me to acknowledge that about the followers that I have. And there are a lot of training programs out there, right? Like you can go on YouTube, or if you get a job in a care community, you might sit down and have to watch a 4-hour training about how to care for people with dementia. But people don't have time for that realistically, especially on the job when you're in the moment day by day. And so my 90-second videos have to be straight to the point, and they've got to be short because that might just only, they might only have 90 seconds in their day to consume this kind of information and learn something.
I can completely see how that is useful, especially because in this day and age, we take in a lot of information at once, and it's that one thing that's going to stick. And I think the trajectory of using something that's straight to the point, fast, and easy to digest is a great way to get that information out there to the people that need it most.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like people are on social media anyway. Like that's kind of where you can escape sometimes to just get your mind off the things that are bothering you and just like have fun. And so it's easy to run to social media for, if you have an extra 3 minutes, or sometimes it ends up being like 3 hours where you're just like scrolling. And so like when I originally thought about making this kind of content, I thought, you know, I would look and see sometimes like the aides that I would be working at when they would take a break, they'd go into the break room and they'd scroll on social media. And I thought, how do I get them to listen to me? Like, how do I get them to be interested in the information that I'm sharing with them? And so that's kind of like the original thing is like, I just want to like crawl in their phone and like talk to them that way because that's where they're learning things. And it just like expanded into so much more than that. But I think the principle still remains.
Yeah, what an amazing sort of tactic to take the resources that are already there, people on their phones, people, invested in social media, and leveraging it to get your messaging across. I know that this is a classic marketing technique, but we're not really selling something. We're providing a service, providing help, providing assistance. So,
Yeah.
honestly, what inspired you to move into this sort of realm?
Yeah. So when I was working as a speech therapist, I, I said I travel a lot now, but I've always traveled a lot. I've always like moved a lot. And so in 8 years of working in long-term care communities, I'd worked in like 8 or 9 different communities across 3 different states. So I saw a lot of different things and I trained a lot of people. Like my job was to train caregivers, professional and personal, in the nursing home that I worked in. Like I would have a patient who was receiving speech therapy services, and many of them had dementia. And I would sit down with the aides and be like, okay, here's how we can support this person a little better. And then their daughter would come in and I would have the same conversation. And I was doing it on such a small scale. Um, and I just like, I loved it. It was my passion. Personally, you'll also know about me that my grandmother has dementia. And so I know this personally and professionally. So I was just in this world of like, I want to keep helping people.
Hmm.
And I was doing it honestly for like other companies. Like I was working for people doing this training. And it came at a time in my husband and I's life where we moved from Kentucky to Washington State. So I had to quit my job, and I was just like, maybe now's the time that I just like try something on my own. Like I just start my own business and like see if there's a way that I can do what I'm doing now, but on a larger scale. And I had the idea of training care communities. I was going to move to Washington and just like knock on the door of a nursing home and be like, hey, can I train your staff? Looked at me and they were like, you're a speech therapist. Like, what do you know about dementia? Like, we have social workers, we have nurses, we have people that are doing that already. And so I was like, okay, maybe I just need to prove that I know what I'm talking about. So I started creating these videos with this whole like these thoughts in my mind of like, I wish I could just crawl in their phone. I'm like, let me just do it. I started a TikTok first, started making videos. And I imagine just showing the executive director, like, look at all my training, like look at my education, I know what I'm talking about. But what ended up happening is that people like at home started following me and they were like, make a video about brushing teeth, make a video about going to the bathroom. And it just blew up so
Hmm.
quickly. So it was not necessarily like a strategic plan I had from the beginning to become like a dementia influencer. It just happens.
And sometimes that's exactly how a lot of these impacts become more, mainstream. And if you originally started out on the TikTok platform, I bet there was more people that weren't personally affected, either the caregiving side or the dementia side, but were just interested to learn more about the things that other people experience. We're all so nosy. We all want to learn
It's
more and more
true.
information. Like I think if one of your videos came across my um for you page and I don't have anyone in my life that's affected by dementia, I'd still be so interested because it's great to learn about things that you personally haven't experienced yourself.
Yeah. No, that's so true. I mean, especially the nosy part. Like
Hmm.
there are there is like people who are personally affected by dementia that follow me. There are people who are professionally in the world of dementia. And then there's just these other people who
Hmm.
will send me messages and they're like, I don't know anyone with dementia, but I think your content's so interesting.
Hmm.
And so several of my videos over the years, like I've probably had like around 10 videos that have hit like 1 million or 2 million views. And it's so interesting when that happens because like the comments that people have, they're just like it's very obvious that people don't know what dementia is, and I welcome that. Like I welcome curiosity because even though they might say some really crazy off the wall things about dementia, like they're here and they're trying to
Hmm.
learn. So, I welcome curiosity and nosiness.
And we can only turn ignorance into, knowledge through that education from someone that actually knows and has done the research and has experienced what it's like. And obviously, since you were personally affected with your grandma having dementia, and then getting involved in this world, like who better is there to, teach all of us that don't know anything about dementia a little bit more about it? So, for all of us that may not know all that much about it, what is dementia? And I know there's a misconception that a lot of people think dementia and Alzheimer's are the same. So,
Mhm.
give us the spiel. What is it?
Yeah, it's the most common question I'm asked. So, yeah, what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? So, dementia actually is a very generic and general term. And there's two criteria for someone to be diagnosed with dementia for the most part. So, the two criteria are you have to have a change in your brain. So, that means that you were one way and then your brain has changed, right? So, this isn't something you're born with, this is something that you develop. And so brain change often looks like memory loss.
Hmm.
It looks like maybe difficulty communicating. It could be changes in personality. So someone who used to be like really sweet and nice all of a sudden is like angry and curses a lot. There's change in brain can include a lot of different things. The second criteria is that that change in the brain has to affect someone's daily life. So that
Hmm.
means it affects your ability to care for yourself, to do all your routines that you normally do, to work, to drive, to pay your bills, to make meals, to get dressed. So that is the basic general definition of dementia. If we were to view it as a big circle, dementia is a change in the brain that affects your ability to function in daily life. Now, there are many different types of dementia or diagnoses that fall under that umbrella of dementia,
Hmm.
and one of them is Alzheimer's disease. So it's the smaller circle inside the big circle of dementia. But Alzheimer's disease, it accounts for 60 to 80% of all dementias that we have. So it
Okay.
is very common. It is the most common. And Alzheimer's disease causes a brain change and it affects someone's life. But specifically, what we typically see in Alzheimer's disease is short-term memory loss. That's the
Hmm.
biggest symptom and usually the first symptom that we see.
That we can
Now,
see,
there's
yeah.
a lot of specifics you can get into about what Alzheimer's looks like in the brain, like plaques and tangles, but in the most general form, dementia is the big circle, Alzheimer's is a small circle inside of it. but it's the most common. There are many, many, many other types.
Okay, I see. And what are some of those other types that,
Yeah.
you commonly see?
Another type is called vascular dementia, which typically is seen in someone who has had a past history of a stroke or a mini stroke. Because vascular dementia, that there has been damage in the brain because of blood flow changes. So there might be a part of the brain that has been damaged because too much blood went to that area, like a hemorrhage, or blood was cut off from that part of the brain, and so it was starved of oxygen and caused damage.
Hmm.
Vascular dementia is can happen to people at any age, and it can happen years after someone's had a stroke or mini stroke. The symptoms don't pop up until a long time after. There's also Lewy body dementia, which is closely associated with what we know as Parkinson's disease.
Hmm.
Lewy body dementia is the type of dementia that Robin Williams had. We know he ended his life a couple years ago, but he was undiagnosed while he was alive, and they found out
Hmm.
after that his brain was riddled with Lewy bodies. Lewy body dementia, the most common symptoms are a sleep behavior disorder, visual hallucinations, and fluctuations throughout the day of being confused and being alert. And
Okay.
that's not memory. That's not often a very first type of symptom. And so it's very easily misdiagnosed, and it was not diagnosed in Robin Williams. And the fourth most common type of dementia is frontotemporal dementia, which is it's come to light recently because of Bruce Willis. It's a
Hmm.
type of dementia he has. Frontotemporal dementia affects the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain, and it most often affects someone's behavior and their ability to communicate. So once again, not necessarily the forgetful short-term memory type of dementia, which is more Alzheimer's. Frontotemporal dementia is the most common type of dementia under the age of 65. So it's a young person's type of dementia. So those are the four most common, but there are many more.
Yeah, there are so many different intricacies of each of
Mhm.
those different types of dementia. So I'm wondering, how would you say the representation of dementia is in the media? Is
Mhm.
it very accurate? Is it very inaccurate? Does it play to certain types? What's your take on that?
Yeah, the type of dementia we often see in media is more of the Alzheimer's type, right? So we see, I've seen clips, especially from shows like in the 90s, where it's like, oh, like grandfather has dementia, and he comes and he's like a bumbling, like, oh, like not recognizing anyone. And it's like a silly, playful kind of confusion, right? And, you know, that's not reflective of reality. First of all, that like people within each type of dementia, there are stages of dementia. So
Mhm.
someone starts off having very mild symptoms and progresses to having very severe symptoms. And so we typically in the media don't see those mild types,
Yeah.
right? We see the people who don't know their daughters' names, they don't remember their own address, they're more progressed. And so that's the thing I would say the most. I think we see more often Alzheimer's, and I think we see more moderate types of dementia. And that's, it is what it is. I think that there's room for different representation. I know in This Is Us recently, they showed the progression of like from mild to the more severe. So I think that was a really hopeful visual. But what happens is when you see such a specific look, then when you hear someone like Bruce Willis having dementia, society at large has a picture of what they think he looks like.
Hmm.
And when that doesn't like match the person or the symptoms that they're having, then we start to say things like, well, I don't really think he has dementia, or like
Yeah.
something else is going on, or like, and there's doubt and there's,
Mm.
sometimes
Delegitimizing
even
it
like combativeness
100%.
or something. Yeah.
Hmm.
And so there's room for much more representation. I think it's getting better. But yeah, that's a good question. I think that we need to open our minds a little bit about what dementia could look like.
I think so too. And, this is probably a case of we see this whether it's about dementia or other factors, is that when a situation is brought into a movie or a TV show, a lot of the people on the writing team and the producing team and the directing team don't have that knowledge base to know that there's even different ways that dementia could look like. So,
Yeah.
as you're, getting the word out there, trying to educate more and more people, what are some common misconceptions about dementia that you would like to continue to work through and bring to greater light in our society today?
Yeah, when I think about that, I think of like, hmm, we'll limit it to three things that I think about. I think the first is that dementia is a tragedy, that like a dementia diagnosis is a death sentence, that
Mm-hmm.
life is over, that like it just that heavy sadness,
Mm-hmm.
which I want to acknowledge. That's part of that can be part of people's experience. Absolutely. But by and large, people who experience dementia, who have a diagnosis, can live with dementia.
Mm-hmm.
I just went on a walk in Spain with like 10 individuals with dementia who are the most excited, lovely, joyful, creative, intelligent people that I've met in a really long time. Like, and they are fighting the stigma of pity, of tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
So, although like two things can be true at once, it can be hard and it can be sad, but it can also be joyful and, in some ways liberating.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard from so many people, and I think I've experienced probably myself in people I've worked with that some people who have always lived their life really uptight and maybe insecure, or judgmental, or anxious have dementia. And all of a sudden they're like relaxed and they're joyful and they're honest. And like it brings out something really beautiful
Mm-hmm.
at times. So there's room for all of those things,
Mm-hmm.
right? Another misconception is that it only happens with old people. And so people can be diagnosed with dementia at any age. Like I said, frontotemporal dementia is most common in people under the age of 65. And so there are people who are living with dementia who have children, young children. There are people who are in the prime of their life that are working still, trying to manage that. And so when we experience someone like that, it feels confusing for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the third, I think, is just that dementia always means that someone is forgetful.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a common symptom, but it's not the only, and it's not the symptom that everyone experiences.
Mm-hmm. I see. So this aspect of fluctuating, I feel like keeps coming up. So I can definitely see how that could be hard on the person that is struggling with dementia themselves, but also the people that are around them, whether it's the caregiver or their family or any friends. So, how do we balance, come to understanding, and use empathy when we are experiencing such fluctuations like that?
Yeah. I had a consultation this week with a caregiver. Ooh, we talked about this very thing because it can be very confusing and you can almost like, I think we use the word like it feels like you're being gaslit, like gaslighting,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like sometimes the person, or if you're experiencing dementia yourself, like you feel so with it and lucid and you're like normal. And then all of a sudden, there could be just a moment where you're so confused and so out of character, like such a different personality. And you can feel like in those moments, it's very clear that something is wrong. But then you have really good times and you're like, wait, maybe I'm just stressed, or like maybe the doctor was wrong. And so I think that's a huge part of it is just like being aware that fluctuations can happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all about education. All of my videos, I don't just want to tell people what to do, but I want to tell them why it's important. And so, first of all, we have to understand why fluctuations can happen, that it can happen, that we like have to live within that reality.
Mm-hmm.
But then what do we do about it? I think this week we talked about like holding things with an open hand, right? If we hold on really tightly to those moments of like lucidity and we're like, oh, like I just want this to be like this forever. And then when it's not, it feels really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if we hold tightly on like, okay, here's these confused moments and this is what life is going to look like and it's always going to be this hard. When things are good, it feels hard. And so it's like we just have to kind of move through moments knowing that there's always going to be seasons. Um, these seasons can last minutes, they can last
Mm-hmm.
months. But we just have to take what comes. And for many personalities, that's really hard. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I think just kind of being aware, but then also being open
Mm-hmm.
is really important. And also like kind of figuring out like what are some triggers that cause confusion, that cause those like downturns, and trying to eliminate that as much as possible. So if that's, being overstimulated, being around too many people, if it's certain medications or something, like identifying what environmental or outside things might be causing that and avoiding it as much as possible.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm putting together some pieces in my head. So we talked a little bit earlier, the foundation, dementia, changing in the brain, and it's affecting daily life. So to link that with the idea of fluctuations, you have to be okay to go with the flow because
Mhm.
if you got a fundamental change happening in your brain, how can you expect to not go through daily changes like that? And the people that are affected and you're surrounded in that energy, it's you have to be able to go with the flow or else it's going to be emotionally taxing on everybody around.
Yeah, for sure.
So, to dive a little bit deeper, so a lot of caregivers aren't trained in the social work aspect, and a lot of them are just, wanting to help out their family members. So, for the ones that don't have a background in education, what advice would you have to give to them or to give to people around them that might not be as understanding or, able to connect and, you know, share in that same feeling?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know an actual like percentage, so I'm making this up. But 90% of caregivers were never asked if they wanted to be a caregiver. They weren't like, whoever needs a caregiver, like I
Mm-hmm.
volunteer as tribute.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I want to do for the rest of my life, It's like they're living their lives, they're working their jobs, they're raising a family, they're retiring and trying to enjoy things, and then someone they love begins to change. That's not just dementia, it could be physical, it could be a heart condition, anything. So caregivers are thrown into this and they are usually, waist deep in it before they even recognize that they are a caregiver. Like
Mm.
that's not even a title that a lot of caregivers realize that they hold.
That they
They're
have,
just
yeah.
they're just a wife. They're just a child. They're just doing the best they can. And so I think sometimes people find themselves in a caring role and they're just like, I don't know how to do this. Yeah, my
Mm-hmm.
background is in, you know, I don't know, trash cans. just looked out the window. Like, I make trash cans for a living. Like, I don't know anything about dementia. That's the majority of people. So, my advice to someone like that is to be open. Um, of course, I think it's easy to acknowledge that I don't know what I'm doing, but take it piece by piece, learn a little bit at a time, um, learn and also acknowledge like what kind of person you are. Are you the kind of person who wants to know every detail about everything that could happen in the future so that you can be prepared? Or do you only want to know what you need right now?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's very much the two kind of people I work with.
Mm-hmm.
And just begin. That's why I think my videos, are helpful for this kind of situation. It's just little pieces at a time. Learn what you want when you want, but keep learning.
Mm-hmm.
And always assume that this is important, that the person with dementia, whatever they're doing, whatever behavior they're exhibiting, it makes sense to them.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't make sense to you. You don't understand it, but you have to be aware of the fact that whatever they're doing makes sense to them and it feels right. They're not just acting nonsensical and being irrational. We have to understand what it is that they're doing and know that there is a reason for it.
Hmm.
I think
And
that's
I definitely think to go about it in a way that's not undermining their feelings. Because if you're confused, imagine how confused they are. Like, if you're
yeah,
frustrated, imagine how frustrated that they are.
yeah,
And you mentioned, like, all of us need to keep learning. And I think that is so important, even for people that are struggling with some sorts of cognitive decline or issues like dementia. So, are there some tactics like additional learning, mind exercises, anything like that that you would recommend to keep, our noodle going?
yeah. Yeah, there's this concept called like cognitive reserve, which I've actually spent most of the morning like looking into and learning more about. I also I always am learning. I'm always open. I know that I'm not an expert in everything, but I've been researching a lot about cognitive reserve, and the idea is that individuals who are more highly educated, like the more education you have, the more cognitively complex your vocation is. So, like people who have really complicated jobs,
Hmm.
and those who continue to do things even outside of retirement, but also in their, personal life that's cognitively stimulating. People who use their brain more will delay dementia if they get it. So it's a preventative thing, but it's also like a delayed thing. So here's the thing. You might find someone who's highly educated, who has a very complex job, and up until they live until 95 years old, and they pass away and they never had any cognitive issues. They were not forgetful, they were not disoriented, they were just totally with it the whole time they were alive. We could dissect their brain and see that their brains are riddled with plaques and tangles
Hmm.
that pathologically would give them a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, let's say. But when they were living, they showed no symptoms of it. That's
Hmm.
because they made so many neural connections in their brain that they were able to compensate. They
Hmm.
were able to still operate in the presence of all of that chaos.
Hmm.
And so that's really interesting because also it's true that if someone lives long enough, they're really smart, they have all this stuff. If they do start showing symptoms, they decline really quickly because
Mm.
they're already so progressed, but their brain was still going
To
that all
keep
of a
them away
sudden
from it. Hmm.
they're like once they do start it's the straw that broke the camel's back, they start to decline really quickly. So all of that to say, keeping our brain healthy is a lifelong event. This is
Hmm.
something that we need to be aware of and doing from the time we're teenagers. We need to be thinking about how is our brain going to age and how is it going to, you know, is it ever going to be diseased? There's things we can do. Now, I say all of that, and there are some types of dementia that are genetic that it doesn't matter what you do, you might get it. So, it's a balance of like being brain healthy, but then also knowing that some people who have dementia like did everything they could and they still got it. So it's a hard balance.
I see. So sometimes you can't fight it, but there are ways that we could, keep our brains healthy while, we
Mhm.
have the capability to. So, what are some recommendations that you have for activities that we can do to, keep it active?
Yeah. So there's like five pillars of brain health. You might find six, but here's the main ones. The first is physical exercise. So keeping active physically, whatever that looks like for you. You can find recommendations online and in research about the level of intensity and the number of minutes and the number of days, but just keep moving. We also see diet is really important. So specifically something called the MIND diet, MIND.
Hmm.
This is a combination of the Mediterranean and the DASH diet, which is a heart health diet. But in general, this is, avoiding processed foods and sugars, like eating whole, real foods.
Hmm.
We also see cognitive stimulation. So that's like kind of what we were just talking about, which is keeping your mind active. As far as specifics, do things that challenge your brain. Okay.
Hmm.
If you work a crossword puzzle every single day for 50 years, although, yes, it's working your brain, it's working the same part of your brain in the same
Over
way
and
every
over
day,
again.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So we think of like, oh, like crossword puzzles and Sudoku for brain stimulation. But if that's the only thing you do, we need variety. So anything that keeps your mind going, that might mean taking a different route home from work
Hmm.
once a week, like trying to, it's something. There's the classic examples of learn a new language or learn a new instrument, but it can be simple things too.
Yeah.
The fourth is manage your own medical conditions. So, like, if you know you have diabetes, like, keep that in check. If you know you have hypothyroidism, like, keep that in check. Um, Make sure that your overall physical body stays well. And then the last is socialization, which is the most fun, which is keeping engaged with other people. It's
Hmm.
not only cognitively stimulating, but research shows that having people in your life and engaging with them often keeps your brain healthier. So that's fun.
Mm. And I feel like that is definitely a factor that has been on the decline ever since, we're on the technological expedition. Everything is getting more, yes, we're more connected, but are we really more connected? I could see what everyone's posting on their like Instagram feed, but is that really what's going on in their everyday life?
Yeah.
And we already talked about how amazing TikTok has been to get the word out there, and Instagram the same way that we're doing right now, for connecting and educating people. But we aren't as connected as we used to be, and
Yeah.
especially ever since COVID, I feel like
Yeah.
social anxiety has been on the rise, isolation, especially in the senior group who is most affected by dementia. So what is your
Yeah.
take on the benefits and maybe the negatives that this highly technical world has had on that socialization piece and just on that cognitive activity piece?
Yeah. It would be really interesting to like, I'm sure someone out there is already doing research on this, but the difference in cognitive and that like cognitive stimulation and social isolation piece in as far as like in-person socialization and virtual socialization, I know there's a difference. And I can assume that it's, more beneficial to be with people in person. But with all that to say, like there's a lot that we can get frustrated by in our society, and, even in our medical system, like any fill in the blank, whatever, there's things we can be frustrated by. But I'm kind of the person that's like, okay, how do we work within the system we have?
Hmm.
Like, let's find the best possible chance of us benefiting from where we are right now with the intention of making things better. And so, for people who are isolated, there are tools and services that are really interesting and like make your life a little bit easier. So, for seniors, who are isolated, there are companies who have virtual services that connect them with other people, and they'll do, yoga classes online, or they'll do cooking classes, or they'll watch someone paint.
Hmm.
There's those kind of things. But overall, I think that especially social media has the power to connect isolated caregivers, which is really, really important. And I know many people personally who have created this support circle of other people who are by themselves caregiving at home that can talk to each other every day, whether it's messaging or video calls or meeting up in person now, to be like, here's this crappy thing that happened to me today. Like, and the other person says, I know what you're dealing with, and they mean it.
Mm.
That's so important. So I think that there's definitely cons, but I think the pros exist and they're important to acknowledge.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And honestly, what you just said, it made something click in my mind that I didn't even think about, because when you are caregiving for someone, it's not like you can, abandon the person you're caring for abandon your post and go out
Yeah.
and get a coffee, like, and meet up with someone to talk about that. Like, you cannot at all. So if they didn't have that connection online, then they would be completely isolated. So that's completely eye-opening to me.
Yeah, exactly. Like they don't have the ability to just leave the house.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, really beautiful, some of the virtual support that exists. And for anyone listening who doesn't have that, um, it's there. And when you're
Mm-hmm.
ready, like we have resources. I have resources for you.
You're in the right place, guys.
Yeah, you're in the right place.
I would love to hear a story that you have from your experience where the work you are doing connected people and was able to, inspire you and remind you that what you're doing is what you're meant to be doing.
Yeah, like I feel like they're like flying through my brain right now. There's so many. Just on a very basic level, I get messages every single day from people, and the ones that were such stand out to me are like, you know, I'm unfollowing you because my father passed away 2 weeks ago, but I just want you to know that in the last 4 months of his life, I felt like I communicated with him and I connected with him in a way that wasn't possible before. And it was
Mm-hmm.
because of the things I learned in your videos.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is the best message I could
Mm-hmm.
get. Like, that's the fact that like people are connecting with individuals with dementia better
Mm-hmm.
and they're having more success in caring for them. That's all I could ever ask. Like I can retire, I'm good. Like it's incredible. Beyond that, in my own life, I've personally met with many caregivers, especially caregivers who are sharing their story on Instagram, in person and like been able to hug their necks and like tell them like you're doing an amazing job. Thank you for sharing your life. And them saying like the same thing back. Like so cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people in my personal life who have never reached out to anyone, who no one knows that they have um, a parent with dementia, but they'll send me a message on my personal account being like, "Hey, I've been watching you for a year.
Mm-hmm.
I am just want to tell you, like, my mom has dementia, and like, can we get coffee?" And I'm like, "Yes." Like, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's so cool. It's humbling for
Mm-hmm.
sure. It's such a huge, you know, purpose-filled job. I'm very
And that
thankful.
is something we could all hope to, reach in our lives. Everyone involved in, um, a sort of work where you're looking to do something, improve other people's lives. Shout out all the people that are involved and are able to, come into work and leave and feel like they made a difference. No matter how cheesy that is, like, more people that are doing that, the better. Like, we are
Yeah.
energetic beings and we're going to feed off of one another. And so thank you to everybody that's involved in work like that. I would love to open the floor to our YouTube and IG live audience for any questions that you guys may have that you would like to be addressed in this conversation today. And while you guys are cooking up some thoughts on that, I would love to ask you a question that I've pondered myself. So, what advice would you give to someone who is worried about their own risk of dementia because of family history?
Yeah. Um, I want to say that just because you have someone in your life or multiple people in your life who have dementia and in your family, that doesn't mean that you're going to get it. And I think that it's important to follow those 5 brain healthy pillars from like today. Like it's always, you can always think, well, like I wish I'd known this 20 years ago. Well, once again, let's work with the system we've got. This is your life. This is where we
Mm-hmm.
are. So focus on those 5 things. Those 5 things are recommended for your heart, for your knees. Like, I mean, it's for every part of your health. Those things are important. So I encourage people at any age to focus on those 5 things. If you are concerned that there are genetically some things going on, you can talk to a doctor about that. There's testing you can get. But right now, science tells us that up to 40% of cases of dementia are preventable. So there are things we can do if we implement, especially those five pillars, we might be able to prevent dementia. And I think it's worth trying.
I think so too. And if that's something that not only is beneficial to our, health, our mental health, it's good for our bodies. Like this is our
Mhm.
our one body that we get in this lifetime, whether you believe in reincarnation or any other sort of lifetime afterwards. Like this meat suit is the one that we've got for, the foreseeable future if we're lucky enough to get that. So we should do as many things as we can that could, be beneficial for it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. How do you stay motivated and continue to do your work, especially when you face challenges, either emotional, mental, whatnot, when you're educating people on such a sensitive and misunderstood topic?
Yeah, what I do is heavy. The name of my business is Be Light, right? But on the backside of things, I don't talk about it a lot, but it's a lot, I'm holding a lot of weight from a lot of people. If you were to peruse through my messages, it would, some of them make my day and some of them ruin it because I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh, that's so heavy. Like, that's so much. So it's a lot. But honestly, that's what motivates me is feedback from the people who follow me that watch my content, is I know that I can take breaks. I'm aware of that. But if I go 2 weeks without posting, I'm like, someone out there is needing a tip. And
Yeah.
it's
Someone
it's
needs me.
exciting. Yeah, and it's like it's motivating. It doesn't feel like a burden. It's fun. Like making videos is fun. It can be hard, but it's overall like a very positive experience. So it's a combination of really amazing people
Mm-hmm.
who take the time to give me feedback and also just doing something that I love
Mm-hmm.
and that fits me exactly, like my gifts, my personality, my strengths, my experience, and my education, like all of that. It's like, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. So, heck yeah, I'm gonna keep doing it.
Heck yeah. I wanted to know, so you've met so many different people in this industry and in this network that obviously have had an impact on your life and keep you doing what you're doing. So, who is someone from that network that you think would be a great speaker to have on our show here at LC that would have something important to say?
Yeah, I would love for you to get in contact maybe with some caregivers of individuals with dementia who are sharing their story, because I think that they are the real, they're the real heroes here. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones on the ground that are doing like the really tough work. I get to, like close my computer, turn off my phone, put my feet up and like relax at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day. And there are so many people who don't.
Mm-hmm.
So there's amazing people out there and also someone with dementia. There are
Mm-hmm.
people with dementia who are sharing their stories that are advocating against this stigma
Mm-hmm.
of the tragedy narrative, many of whom I walked with. I could get you in contact with a lot of really inspiring, incredible people with dementia who are doing work that only people with dementia can do.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say caregivers are the heroes, individuals with dementia are the experts. So
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones that can speak to this in a really impactful, honest way. And they're the most invested in this conversation.
Well, I would love to get in contact with any of those amazing and inspiring people. Shout out to the caregivers and to the dementia havers out there,
Yeah.
because you guys are, staying strong every single day. So you need to be, what is the word I'm looking for? Your hard work, your dedication needs to be corroborated and appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'd love to know what lasting piece of advice while we end our YouTube stream, at least. We know IG is still here in the background, but what's a lasting piece of advice you have for our listeners out there that either are personally affected or just interested in the topic of caregiving and dementia?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me think of one. I think I I walked the Camino de Santiago with a really special woman who like said the nicest things to me that any human has ever said to me. She's living with dementia. And she took my head in her hands and was just like, just keep going. Like, just keep going. The world needs you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so like I felt anyone could say that to me, but coming from her was really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm also aware of the fact that she doesn't fully understand what I do,
Mm-hmm.
but she just like what little bit she heard from me. She didn't know me before this, or like she didn't follow me or anything, but um, she just like connected and said like, what you're doing is so important. Like, keep going. The world needs you. And that's what I want to do to every like caregiver out there. Like
Mm-hmm.
anyone who even wants to choose to be in the field of dementia care, like I want to grab your face and say, like, keep going. The world needs you. Because we all have different gifts and personalities. We're placed in different geographical locations. And there's only, like, we have the ability to reach a certain type of person that who I reach might not be who someone else could reach, and vice versa. Like, we all have this is another quote from someone else I met on this walk. But we all hold a piece of the puzzle in the
Mm-hmm.
big picture, and we just have to figure out what's our piece
Mm-hmm.
and like how do we live that out and play it well, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
100%. And I think it's even more impactful that such a raw piece of soul came from someone that, might be written off as, oh, crazy old lady losing her mind. But that's exactly why we're having this conversation, because that is the stigma that we're looking to destabilize. So I think it's so beautiful that you were able to meet so many amazing people and share their stories here today. And I hope that if anyone watching out there has been struggling in their own mental cage, is that, like we said, there's people out there, there's resources, like get into contact if you feel like you're able to. But even if you don't, try to push, because this is our one life and we got to continue living it and try to do it as best as we can. So I'd
yeah.
love to thank everybody who, came and joined in this conversation with us today. But I'd like to give the biggest shout out to you, Adria, because you've opened my eyes and mind in ways that I never thought of. And I obviously need to get out there more, and I need to talk to more people, and I need to, continue educating myself on things that I'm not an expert on, because like the first thing we need to do is admit that we are not an
Mhm.
expert when we could completely learn so many more things. So I'm so thankful that one of our lovely junior members on our team put us into contact, and that we were able to have this conversation. And yeah, I just think it's so amazing. Thank you so much, and thank you for the work that you continue to do day in and day out.
Well, thank you. It was a great conversation. I appreciate your interest, your curiosity. That's where it all starts.
Mhm.
And yeah, I had a lot of fun talking with you, Piper.
Well, hopefully we can do it again. And yeah, shout out everybody. I know we have to close off our YouTube, so thank you everybody for coming out. We hope to catch you in the next episode, and we'll see you then. But I know we've got our IG fans still out here, so I'm wondering, for our IG live over here, while we shut down the YouTube. What are some lasting things you think we didn't reiterate enough today?
Yeah. I'm just like scrolling through. I see